Alright, hello. I don't know if it's me with the thing it's showing as a viewer or if it's someone else, but welcome if someone's here. I am about to get some stuff worked on for tonight's game. So it started off looking over the things that the players themselves wanted, like here, these are the lore sheets that they have bought. The ones that are highlighted are things over the past several episodes or issues or what have you, sessions that they've essentially bought for each other. They want to see these things happen with the players, and I have a few new things that I need to introduce this session. So, big things. Golden Dragon, we kind of want to look in, or Pale Blossom rather. I'd like to have recognized as Imperial lineage. What a foreshadow danger there. So with Plum Blossom, who is the illegitimate son of who was the current emperor, who disappeared, and who they will eventually discover is Golden Dragon, one of the Saint Beasts. We've decided to go with the idea that the emperor essentially left, and there's a number of possible reasons why, but faked his own death/disappearance, has left to rejoin the Wulin, essentially the martial art worlds, as one of the great Saint Beasts, of which there are 4. Golden Dragon is essentially baked into the lore of Legends of the Wulin as one of a couple different possibilities for the Emperor. So eventually, we're going to want to get there. We're going to want to show that that's Plum Blossom's father. Plum Blossom is a courtier who works at a pleasure house, House of the Blue Orchid, and one of the things that player wants to really kind of dive into is the various essentially wants to dive into relationships, a mythic China that is much more open to like LGBTQ relationships. So Mournful Ghost, who is a member of the Falling Leaves Society, in particular, the Blue Leaves or Blue Flames, but is someone who was invited last time. He, this time, is going to show up. And we had a caller earlier who fell in love that I will be doing some stuff with this time. So, Blue Flames or Blue Leaves? Blue Flame. So with Plum Blossom and Pale Orchid, who both work at the new House of the Blue Orchid, what I want to accomplish, I want to essentially kickstart the rivalry between new House of the Blue Orchid and their competitors. And here, one of the things I find super useful to prepare has been Trello. So I'm able to put information, Magnificent Inc., the city that we're sort of in, the various factions that they have come across so far. And actually, let me specifically add House of the Blue Orchid. I'm going to add more specific things to that, and I want to do the rival house, which we have introduced someone from. The Fire Doctrine will also work into what is happening today. So, Kazen. Some of these. I made notes on my previous campaign notes. Administrator being groomed to the capital. Is the caller that fell in love. Make a note here. Spell it right. Pretty sure that's who he is. We've had a couple weeks off. Hooded Cobra. Couple notes here. Villainous, spell that wrong. Villainous Wulin came to take Cruelest Lin. I am not spelling for crap today. Cruelest Lin from Pale Orchid was defeated badly by Pale Orchid because she was rolling crazy good. I thought that would be a more difficult fight. Hooded Cobra got his ass kicked. Was defeated by Pale Orchid. And as a matter of fact, we bring up his character sheets. Or I think it's probably in my notes. His last session was essentially a fight between these different characters. Boom. Did I put on here what his... Let me check and see if it happened to actually just... If I had just put it in Roll20. As well. Date modified. So one thing I really discovered last week that we had some problems just as far as keeping track of the amount of information, especially when it came to combat. So I've created some problems just as far as keeping... Let's do... Pause that. I have created some... Okay, yeah, it's under role-playing games. So that's good. Sage... I think I had it here. However, the map I would like to look at, because that will be useful, actually, with the combat thing itself. So Legends of the Wulin has a pretty involved combat system. However, it is a combat system that I like big parts of it because it essentially feels very much like... there's a comic I used to be a big fan of that is it's like a Korean or Japanese comic that was put out in America by Jademan Comics in the 90s. And I used to rush as quickly as possible to the comic shop, Dragon's Lair, in Champaign, when that was still open, when comics came out, primarily to try to get a copy of this particular comic. Because it felt like 8 people read it, and like 9 got ordered, which was frustrating. And I eventually picked up the entire run. And it was a wuxia comic where you would have combats going on for literally several issues. going through them. And one of the really cool things was story. Oh, here we go. That's the information I need. Storyline was still going through. It was interesting, but the combats were dynamic. And one of the things Legends of the Wulin did is it feels like that comic that I was a big fan of. Okay, so what we had last time. So I've got my information. Janique Manor to talk to Master Flawless about Summer Salamander. That's something I'll put down there in a bit. But Hooded Cobra. Major condition. Major Cobra just got the crap beat out of him. So, yeah, major condition basically has been dominated. A breath penalty there. There was also a major condition. Disciple of the Sword, which happened at the end. What conditions are you can put on someone like in a combat, or there's other way you can do it verbally if you're like a courtier or have the courtier secret arts. You put a condition on someone that gives them a bonus or a penalty if they do or do not do something. So, for example, Hooded Cobra, we decided, got a major disciple of the sword. So after getting his ass completely stomped, and dominated badly, because we got a chance to showcase Plum Blossoms, or rather Pale Orchid's, the darker part of her that is tied in with the bane of the Wulin that her uncle was. And so we got to show her, like, just beating the living tar out of him. And she got very lucky in her rolls, but just stomped him so bad that we had the Dominated was one of the effects, and that came directly out of the combat. So he has basically a breath penalty. He's lacking in his confidence when he doesn't show deferment to her. And actually, I'll make a note there on his thing. Basically, when acting cocky, he's got the breath penalty, because the dude has been cowed badly. He's not able to gain back his chi, so like he's not able to use his abilities, his internal martial arts as freely as he used to. And the action penalty, when he acts against Pale Orchid, because he is convinced by what she had that while she is young, while she is not quite as experienced as Hooded Cobra is convinced that she is the rightful bearer of the sword, which I think is cool. It's one of the things you can basically beat someone into friendship, or in this case, someone into helping me make Pale Orchid's life a little more difficult, which I think is fantastic. We first showed them how it was using when the Mook fight that we started off with this Lesser Legend Tiger Shark. Tiger Shark is not a big deal. I use him as one of our first battles. The couple times where I've run Legends of the Wulin, and at one point they're like, well, we kind of want to kill this guy, but then realizing it's not necessarily with the type of fiction that they're talking about, but they realized that once they rolled the stuff and I was talking them through it, they understood that they could actually put penalties on him if he's doing things for this evil society he is a part of, which might go away at some point, but it's kind of more fun to split him off and have him become maybe someone who shows up a little later on. He was sort of a nobody for them to fight. I've had fun with him as a character before. So it's a neat way of showing, here's what you can do with this system. So here, it's not just the Hooded Cobra is going to keep coming back and trying to take the sword unless she kills him. We have now made him into someone who is maybe actively going to try to help her live up to this idea of the sword, which I think is great. So I want to kickstart the rivalry between the new House of the Blue Orchid and the previous one. Let's just say that for Hooded Cobra. So we'll go through here and put some information in here. Kobai was, let me edit that a little bit, lover of Lone Sparrow. So I can easily find what everyone was, because I was not keeping in charge quite as much. So Dai Heling is in charge of the Blue Orchid. Let me double check a few things here. If you've never used... I think Shinja was the courtesan from the rivals. If you've never used Trello, what I find it really useful for is just kind of keeping information. And I will double check if I had put a name down for them in a minute. But you can kind of keep information about people, about things. It helps if you keep up with it a little better than I did. Courtesan. Okay, Shiren. Yeah, head of merchant house. Make a note. He is information on Eagle Talon Society decision, especially as regards Falling Leaf Society and Resplendent Phoenix Society. So one of the things in the background is Gallant Eagle, who is the head of the Eagle Talons, which is essentially Wulin bodyguards, is stepping down next year, and a lot of people are essentially trying to make themselves seem worthy to take over, because he basically set it open that anybody could possibly take over. It doesn't have to be a member of the Eagle Talons, doesn't have to be one of his children, who are both Wulin warriors in their own right. So one of the things we're using in this town, we have these two great societies, both of which are a little cast adrift with the changes that we made for Shaozen with our game, because we have players who are LGBTQ, and we wanted that to be something that was not an issue in the game. We wanted that to be open and accepted. So you have the highly traditional society that is now finding that there's been some major social changes in the world, and there's a part of them that's still fighting against that. But there's another part, the Blue Flames, that are actually gaining more power in them. And so they're holding up honor and these other things, but they're a little bit adrift. But the Resplendent Phoenix Society's position was primarily to essentially make things better for women in China. So with that, one of the things that since they've kind of succeeded, because we wanted equality, and while it's basically stated that the Wulin itself has equality, because let me do this. The Wulin itself has equality because it's much more of a meritocracy. I have to do this way. I'll just do this. I will put it in as Dungeons and Dragons, even though that's not really what I'm doing. Okay, I'll save that. So they are now at a place where their major thing has sort of succeeded, so they have to figure out what they want to be. So the fact that they are struggling against what is going on with the that they would like to essentially be have someone there who takes over on the Eagle Talons, so that they can probably turn the Eagle Talons a little more into what Gallant Eagle originally wanted, which was, instead of being much more mercenary as it is, like whoever can pay will be able to do their thing, they will be able to work just for the more righteous causes. And both Falling Leaf Society or Resplendent Phoenix Society are interested in that, but their rivalry is elevated here because they're trying to show their strength in this new world that might be created. Now, Zenki is a scholar that Pale Blossom went to about her uncle's sword. We have, of course, House of the Blue Orchid. What information I put here? Declaring a charge. Decadence of Autumn is Plum Blossom's mother's tea house. This is all in magnificent ink. Penki is a courtesan at the Blue Orchid. The Supine Chair. Let me fix that spelling. The Supine Chair is the rival house. That is actually going to be practically across the street from the new House of the Blue Orchid. Hello, person. Feel free to join in chat if you want to see. This will be practically across the street from the new House of the Blue Orchid in the Magistrates District. Because we want to get them involved in the politics. Because we've got Pale Orchid wanting to learn more about her uncle and the ties she's got to her uncle's evil sword. And we've got Plum Blossom really wanting to kind of get involved in those because Plum Blossom's father was the old emperor. Now the thing is, this leaves Lone Sparrow, our third player, essentially in a place where what they're doing, he's sort of a part of. But that player is someone who I've discovered in Unknown Armies, while we had much more personal things going on with the other two characters. Plum Blossom's character was trying to get his husband back, who had been taken through this room of renunciation and changed. So there was the emotional aspect of his character was the driving force of that campaign. Pale Orchid's player, Roxy, essentially was a avatar of the star. So her thing was to be sort of the center of attention, and she was a touring musician. And basically just giving places for her to become that center of attention was one of the things that she really, really loved doing in that game. And Lone Sparrow's player, what he just adored was the ability to show how awesome his character was, because he was a cinemancer, essentially any kind of movie cliche that was thrown out. And because I've got a heavy improv background, I do lots of little incidental role-playing just kind of off the cuff while they're talking to people. So there's little things here and there that he was able to pick up and then just spin into power. So he got to unleash all this cool stuff. Now, what he has come up with is a character who is obsessed with speed. And I kind of want to give him opportunities to show how awesome he is when it comes to speed. He wants to have a hand in helping determine what happens with the Eagle Talons, because eventually you're going to have the choice of who is going to be the person to take over. And I have a feeling Lone Sparrow is kind of wanting to put himself up for it after some adventures, and that would be awesome, because that is the kind of thing Legends of the Wulin is very good at. But I got to bait him a little bit last session when he and Plum Blossom fought Winter and Summer Orchid, or Winter and Summer Salamander. Who was it that escaped? It was Summer Salamander that escaped. Campaign notes. I wasn't in this one. It was in... Oh, it was the one further down. Yeah, so... Winter Salamander escaped and has an enrapturement with Plum Blossom. But Summer Salamander was captured and taken by the Falling Leaves Society, who they were trying to sabotage and essentially burn down one of their houses in Magnificent Ink. So the plans they originally had, that the Fire Doctrine was going to try to spark problems between these two major societies, is being thrown to the side. Primarily because the players themselves were less interested in the kind of rivalry between Falling Leaves Society and Resplendent Phoenix, but were much more interested in the Pleasure House, the House of the Blue Orchid that they were becoming a part of, and the Fire Doctrine itself. So this cult of kind of barbarian fire, not worshippers, kind of worshippers. They were much more interested in those things, and they literally would sort of ask each other, well, should we look into this? And their whole thing was, I'm a little more interested in the fire cult, we're going to find them. So I'm going to be backgrounding the Resplendent Phoenix Society and Falling Leaves Society, with the exception of how they specifically deal with two characters they've met so far. Mournful Ghost, who got to kick one of the players through a window and then escape into the river when he was stealing some stuff. And then when the players helped save a Falling Leaves Society house that was being attacked, they then gave them back this information that was going to the Resplendent Phoenix Society. And then one of the members of the Resplendent Phoenix Society is a guard in the Pleasure House. So the benevolent Lynn, they have been dealing with her. So essentially they can become the proxies for this thing in the background, so it can make it a little more interesting for them. Okay, so we've got two stories essentially going on. We'll kickstart the rivalry between the House of the Blue Orchid and the Supine Chair. I want to give the information that they bought about Golden Dragon's location. The other Saint Beast, I'm going to discover which one that needs to be. I want delve deeper into the politics. Someone recognizes Blossom's lineage. Magistrate visits Pale Orchid specifically because of the sword. This will be someone who's been working with the Black Lotus Society and Hooded Cobra Scent, essentially to kind of find some more information to see what he can do to help push her into the destiny that he now believes she deserves. Also, I want to play up see if the rivalry between Plum and Pale is going to happen. And it may or may not. Because one of the things they bought was that essentially Pale Orchid became much more popular in the Pleasure House, because one of the ideas was that essentially this is one of these, still getting the names kind of down. Yeah, basically Plum Blossom's whole thing was this massively popular and skilled courtier who wanted to work in one of the pleasure houses. They kind of brought Pale Orchid in because Pale Orchid's trying to find her place. And so we can kind of go Plum Blossom. I definitely want Mournful Ghost to show up, deepen this relationship. And why am I all over the place with spelling today? Discord. Double check what I asked them. And if we have the magistrate coming in, yeah, one of the things that Plum Blossom is interested in, or Pale Orchid rather, is not letting people in. And I think we can do something there with Benevolent Lynn, because I do want to build some stuff with the Falling Leaves and the Falling Leaves and the Resplendent Phoenix, and it'll help to have each of them dealing with those. Also, I wouldn't mind we get the person who is in love notices the similarities, and maybe visited by the scholar. More information, and the magistrate, which I'll come up with a name for here in a little bit. So these are the things I want to do with those two. We've got something different with Lone Sparrow, and I have a feeling this will be sort of fun. So gets to meet Master Flawless. So Master Flawless, rank 3 martial artist who's one of the ones in charge of the Falling Leaf Society here in town, which is one of their major places. He's not one of the major ones involved, but he is. He's the one that they're going to be dealing with for a little bit. I do want to get to a place where we can kind of have where we can kind of get the three of them out of the city for like kind of a mixed mission together, but I also want to get them all a little bit more comfortable with the combat system. So he'll have a thing with Master Flawless, getting Summer Salamander to be released. I have a new villain that I want to showcase. So I created these. So one of the things, Legends of the Wulin has got like a ridiculously complicated, in some respects, combat system, and it's when you have a character down and you know how they work, they're actually not that hard to know how to use them. The problem is players get to focus on one character. They get to kind of focus on, here's what my guy is good at, here are all my abilities. I get to use those in really cool ways. As the GM, last time we had basically the whole thing was 3 different battles. We had Pale Orchid taking on Hooded Cobra in an inn that she was in because he was coming after the sword, which he wanted to claim, and she dominated the hell out of him. We also had Winter and Summer Salamander each separately fighting Lone Sparrow and Pale Orchid, or Plum Blossom rather, while they were trying to sabotage one of the House of the Falling Leaves main houses there in the city. So the two of them were actually fighting on like separate rooftops, but one of the problems is there's some really cool things about Winter and Summer Salamander that, because I was trying to juggle clumsily a whole bunch of different information, I was not really able to play with. So what I created was on Google Slides, where I can basically put all the information I need for them pretty easily, because I'm using this, and I created a combat sheet which kind of looks like a nightmare, but was actually fairly easy to use in practice in a lot of respects, which was nice. As I got to just check, here's what this person's doing, and then we could put their information, like the roles they did, up there, and then split them, and I was looking for the green on other people's sheets. That's what they were defending against, or they were doing the same for me against mine. But I didn't really get to use them as much because I had to be I had to delve so deep into the system. I just didn't have a chance to play with them as much as I sort of wanted to. Like one of the things, Summer Salamander is supposed to viciously insult the opponents. I could do descriptions that were cool of what they were doing, but I didn't get into the role-playing as much because I was jumping around. So I've created these. Now we've got Wing Sharpay, who is going to be the incredibly fast one that we want to meet today, because it's someone who is, I think, honestly not as fast as Lone Sparrow, but is a rank above, which means basically they're rolling more dice anytime she does something. So that by itself will help, but I also want to get a little bit more into the Fire Doctrine. So, with these, and I think Summer Salamander, I like the idea that he kind of recognized Lone Sparrow's obsession and wants to try to possibly convert him, or lead, if that doesn't work, lead him into a trap. because Wing Sharpay is essentially fast as hell. So they're going to be outside of the city, which means one of the things I have to sort of determine is what is the Fire Doctrine doing besides trying to cause some problems between these. So the original plan now has to become a little more important than it originally was because they want to delve more into the Fire Doctrine. When I thought just a few of them were going to become a little more of a thing they had to deal with. And there's also, make a note here, Red Eagle is essentially the leader of this particular group. So Fire Doctrine were originally supposed to create friction between Falling Leaf Society or Splendid Phoenix Society, which with a couple acts of sabotage they thought would actually look fairly easy. That has not worked. The other part of the plan, they were going to be doing that, and while they were sort of fighting, wanted to cause enough damage that the magistrates became involved, because Magnificent Inc. is a place where a lot of the old and powerful magistrates go to retire. It's got a lot of scholars. If these combats are happening and it is leading people to set shit on fire, to cause damage in other places, suddenly you have the guard and such getting involved. And what they're wanting to do, essentially, cause enough chaos, there's riots, chaos, to damage the city leadership structure. And they want to get enough power to take hostages and take the city. And I think part of it is they also want to use that opportunity to look for information on the Holy Fire Sutras in the colleges. So in these university areas, they want to use that to gain their information. Things have changed a little bit, so that's not going to work. The fact that they're there is kind of known. Main goal, well, two goals, is they want to look for information. They also want to take down governmental structures, because one of the things with the Fire Doctrines is they're a lot of times they're the outcast of Shenzhou. They are the ones who are not accepted because they're not sort of the correct lineage. They come from basically some of the peoples that were not considered a part of the people in Mythic China. So they're outsiders. So one of the things by taking it down, because they are going to be aware that there is going to be a coup relatively soon. Actually, yeah, honestly, new plan. We can get some information on the coup coming in. So coup at the capital with a new emperor by the eunuchs, which I maybe spelled right. Nope, did not spell right. Yeah, so there'll be a coup happening eventually. We want to bring some stuff to it. So what they want to do is essentially time things to go at their worst when the coup is happening, so that the Fire Doctrine is able to essentially solidify their space here, to give them some time to search, but to also take down a major portion, have hostages, because you do have a lot of families and such come here, because it's this beautiful area and places where a lot of people plan on retiring. So you drop your family there, because that's where you're going back to when you're not in the capital. So what I kind of want to push things for, all said and done, eventually, put this at the bottom, future possible threats. These are ones that the players themselves may stumble onto. They may also go in very different directions, but right now I do want to set up some threads to be used later on that will involve the players more. So we're going to have probably players questing to discover the Golden Dragon. The Golden Dragon is the Emperor. And it would give a chance to go out and have a more traditional, here's a group of Wulin here's a group of Wulin warriors going off, sort of having some adventures. And I want to do that once we're more comfortable with the combat system, all of us. And we'll see how well these cheat sheets help me, and I'm hoping they help quite a bit. So I want that. I think going along with that, we have the coup in the capital being foreshadowed and brought up at the same time, or the plans are to get them to the point where we also are going to have Magnificent Inc. under attack from the Fire Doctrine, who are partly looking for equality because they are not considered, they're considered barbarians in much of Shenzhou. We also have the legacy of Pale Orchid's uncle, and the fact that he's probably still alive, and they'll actually end up buying that with their lore sheets, where they can kind of decide was he still alive or not. But we definitely need to have associates of Grievous Distance as a part of it. My spelling today is awful. So, of Grievous Distance, and I like the idea of building this Disciple of the Swords, which they started off with when they beat the living she beat the living shit out of Hooded Cobra. And that's actually pretty good. Oh yeah, and we also have, take that back one. I'll fix that later. We also have the fact that we need to get into what's happening with the Heaven's Sword Alliance wanting the sword back once they discover that Pale Orchid has stolen it. So I've got some stuff tied into the personal things that are going on with the characters. That's the important thing. So Plum Blossom and Pale Orchid are both going to be set up at the new House of the Blue Orchid, and they are going to have the rivalries with the one across the street. We're going to have Plum Blossom also discover the lineage. Yeah, that thing with the lineage can also be where we get the information about the dragon. Yeah, of the Saint Beast. So I need to decide which of the Saint Beasts, because there are 4 of them. And when I was looking through, the interesting thing about the thing I found about the Saint Beasts, 2 of them fit what the players are doing very well. We have one of them that doesn't, and I've got to decide which one that I want to use for that. And very quickly, for Lone Sparrow, the Devil Deflecting Blades, that information. That's not really the future, but he wants to start looking that up because he definitely wants the let's put that actually in the stacks. Oh, it'd be so great if he ended up working with Wing Sharpay, possibly. So if the 2 of them are going in to try to find some things that are going to be difficult in the forbidden areas of the stacks that Wing Sharpay is aware of, but with his help, because she's looking for stuff on the fire, the Holy Fire Sutras. And knows about the other ones and is less interested in them, because he wants to have the thing where his waves that he creates for covering ground, basically his movement, that nobody can stop him. Though I will say, currently, it's super hard to stop him because his initiative is insane. Like, just faster than hell. He really did sort of optimize for that, so he's very hard to touch. Cool. So, the stuff in the Heaven Alliance Sword, I want the sword back, and maybe get more about Deflecting Blade and the Sword Saint Apotheosis, because he wants an opportunity to prove that he's a badass, which might lead into new head of the Eagle Talons. So that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 major plot threads are what I want to be moving towards when it comes to the players. And I think we're pretty much ready. So we're going to spend a good amount of time with Pale Orchid and Plum Blossom at the new house of the Blue Orchid. I have several characters for them to sort of interact with, to get them a little bit more into stuff with their stories. Oh, we also have... Oh, wait, what if... Okay, oh, this will be great. What if, one of the other stuff that they bought was a previous lover of Zhao Ma is a problem. Zhao Ma is the daughter of Gallant Eagle and trying to become one of the heads of it. What if at one point, Zhao Ma and Wing Sharpei actually had been lovers? I think that sounds awesome. And is aware of the relationship between Lone Sparrow and Zhao Ma, which, oh, that's so cool. So yeah, we'll do the love triangle thing, which I think will be fantastic. With someone who's a bit more powerful, but the speed of Lone Sparrow is pretty high. So I have a feeling we'll have a bunch of like courtier stuff. We'll have probably one combat that's probably more about speed than anything else. And building a lot of the stuff that's going to be happening later towards where we can get the players as a single group again. I really don't mind having them split, because it works fairly well as long as I can be bouncing back and forth with enough for the players and have a bunch of the various storylines and role-playing going on. And because of things like deeds, they actually have a reason to be paying more attention to what's happening to the other players. And that is super cool because the game itself mechanizes being a fan of your fellow player and gives you the ability to buy the things that you want to see for them, and really do some kind of neat things. So, cool. I think this is essentially, I mean, in certain respects, this is more than I go into with a standard prep, but it's the sort of thing I think over for prep, because we're dealing with the three different storylines, and because they're able to buy individual stuff for each other, which they have been, there's a bunch of stuff that they're going to want to play with, and I need to give Lone Sparrow a little bit more space to be awesome in the way that Lone Sparrow is awesome, which is a bit different than the way the other characters are awesome. And if he's stuck at the Blue Orchid, we don't get that opportunity nearly as much, because the Blue Orchid stuff is easy and much easier and fun for me to do. The other stuff I like a lot. It'll be more useful if we can kind of do it with a person at a time, instead of try to do 3 individual battles, which means it just kind of comes down to numbers, which was not as much fun as it could have been, particularly when I have all my stuff a little better put together. So that is how I am going to be prepping for tonight's game. So that is Legends of the Wulin. I might actually stream it on here. I put it up on YouTube too, but see if people are interested in sort of taking a look and see what we're doing. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you later.